We celebrate today the feast of St. John of Capistrano, who was born and raised in Italy, but ultimately would become a great preacher all throughout Europe, strengthening the church. He died ultimately in 1456. He was a Franciscan, so followed in the pattern and the life of St. Francis of Assisi. He has a quote that I'd like to just have you reflect upon today. He says this: "Those who are called to the table of the Lord must glow with the brightness that comes from the good example of a praiseworthy and blameless life. They must completely remove from their lives the filth and the uncleanliness of vice. Those who are called to the table of the Lord must glow with the brightness that comes from the good example of a praiseworthy and blameless life. They must completely remove from their lives the filth and the uncleanliness of vice." St. John of Capistrano is actually not speaking to lay people here. He's speaking of priests. He continues, "Truly the unclean, immoral cleric is trampled underfoot like worthless manure. He is saturated with the filth of vice and entangled in the chains of sin. In this contradiction, he must be considered worthless, both to himself and to others. As St. Gregory says, when a man's life is frowned upon, it follows that his preaching will also be despised." My dear brothers and sisters, we live in a time and an era, without a doubt, when many are searching. I've given other homilies in the past few months when there is confusion about the church, the Pope's error in speaking about homosexuality just a few days ago, or 2 days ago. I would imagine that the majority of strong Orthodox Catholics did not go and look for the advice of a priest or a bishop. They most likely sought out the clarification and the teaching of lay evangelists who, thanks be to God, have been holding up the church in orthodoxy and in truth. We live in an era, we live in a time where those who are called to the table of the Lord must glow with brightness. But we also live in an era and a time where there is much confusion and lack of direction and insight, because many clerics, many priests, many bishops have become one with the world, and thus bring even more confusion during this period in this era of confusion. I constantly thank you for the prayers that you offer for me, and I ask that you please continue praying for me, but that we also pray fervently for the continual conversion and renewal of the priesthood. I am on day 80 of Exodus 90, and the reflection on day 80 was to look at Moses, who spent 2 40-day periods on Mount Sinai in silence, in prayer with the Lord. And that 40 and 40, if you add them together, is 80. It just so happens that that was the biblical passage that because you literally read through Exodus, and then the author makes the connection to the fact that today is day 80 for us, 80 days of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. When one begins Exodus 90, they have to write down a concrete why. Why am I doing this? Why am I choosing to fast and pray and discipline and fraternity for 80 days? You have to share that with your accountability partner and your larger fraternity group. And one of my whys that has been a why of mine for the past few years is this great desire that I have to figure out an effective way to help brother priests and seminarians to transform parish life and to strive to live out their priesthood with greater zeal and holiness. And as I read these words today, in the context of where we are at in our world today, yesterday speaking even to my own brother priests about the confusion brought about by the Pope's teachings, the majority of my own brother priests sought out lay evangelists. Matt Fradd, Taylor Marshall, to find out what actually happened. We live in an era where my own brother priests didn't seek out advice or counsel from their bishop or seek advice or counsel from even brother priests. And thus, the call that we need to have to pray for the holiness and the zeal that is necessary for the revival and the renewal of the priesthood, of seminary life, and that great call that we need within the church. Of course, yesterday we rejoiced through the intercession of St. John Paul II for Amy Coney Barrett. We should all be rejoicing on Monday in a very glorious way. But what if the pro-life cause was solely in the hands of clerics? Where would we be right now? What if the pro-life cause was solely led by bishops in our church? Where would we be right now? One of the great gifts of the Second Vatican Council was the emphasis of the laity and the role of the laity in bringing about the great things that take place in our church. And I truly just, as I've said before, when I had dinner with Scott Hahn the night before E6 this past year, which is, I still just think, a miracle when we think about that there are 1,600 men who were able to go to confession literally a week and a half prior to the shutdown of the pandemic. I mean, you just that was a grace. But Scott Hahn the night before at the St. Martin Rectory, he said, when I converted to Roman Catholicism, never in my life did I think that I would be going around and preaching as a lay evangelist. Because there wasn't a place for me. Priests preached. Bishops preached, not lay people. And yet now if we look at the church is dominated by very effective, very charismatic lay people who are filling the role of priests, as priests have slumped to the slide in mediocrity and laziness. And thus this fervor that we hear from St. John of Capistrano today, this reminder and this hope that we need to have, that this renewal that he was able to bring about can be brought about again today, and that we are called, all of us, myself included, you as well, to pray for our fathers, many who have gone to sleep, that they may wake up in these turbulent times and with fervor, with grace, with zeal, bring conversion and renewal to the church and to the world. So may we pray through the intercession of St. John of Capistrano today, and may we ourselves, all of us, approach the table of the Lord with glowing brightness from the good example and praiseworthy and blameless life that we live, and that we may continue, all of us, to strive to remove from our lives the filth and the uncleanliness of vice. Let us stand.